Welcome to True Crime in America, presented by tcavanaugh.com, True Crime Stories. The story you are about to hear is true. The focus of these stories is to remember the victims of crime rather than focusing on the perpetrator. Some of these stories are very dark and not appropriate for younger listeners. Today's story, Unheard Voices, the untold tales of Ed Gein's victims. In a tavern just outside of Plainfield, Wisconsin, Mary Logan prepared for the influx of customers seeking a satisfying meal and a refreshing drink. As the clock ticked just past 4 p.m. on that Wednesday afternoon of December 8, 1954, the tavern lay empty, devoid of its usual patrons. Unperturbed by the absence of customers at that moment, given the prosperity of her establishment, Mary seized the opportunity of the lull. With a book in hand and a steaming cup of coffee nearby, she settled herself at a table within the tavern. Pausing momentarily from her reading, Mary glanced around the tavern, reflecting upon her journey and achievements since her immigration from Germany to America. The path hadn't been an easy one for her. At the tender age of 19 in 1920, she wed Joseph Medford, a 34-year-old miner from Springfield, Illinois. However, the union was short-lived, as she departed just 18 months later, seeking a new beginning in Chicago. By December 23, 1925, her marriage to Joseph Medford had dissolved through a legal decree. A decade after these tumultuous events, on February 17, 1935, Mary tied the knot with Louis Peck in Chicago. This relationship, fraught with cruelty, endured merely 4 years before Mary sought and obtained a divorce from Louis in 1944. Feeling the pull of change, Mary made the decision to bid farewell to Chicago and set her sights on Pine Grove, Wisconsin. It was in Pine Grove where she obtained a coveted tavern license, ultimately realizing her dream of launching her own establishment. Opening the tavern's doors in 1949, Mary reveled in a newfound financial stability that had eluded her in the past. Around 5:30 p.m., Seymour Leister, a regular patron of Mary's tavern, strolled over from his nearby residence. His routine visit, however, took a drastic turn as he approached the tavern. Illuminated by light and with its door unlocked, the establishment appeared eerily empty, devoid of Mary's familiar presence. A disarrayed scene awaited Seymour within the tavern. An upturned chair, a forgotten book, and spilt coffee mingling with a disturbingly sizable pool of blood on the floor, indicating a harrowing event had unfolded within those walls. A chilling sight met Seymour's gaze as he noticed traces suggesting a significant disturbance, prompting him to quickly contact the authorities and alert them to the grisly discovery. Portage County Sheriff Harold S. Thompson responded promptly and launched the investigation into Mary Hogan's baffling disappearance. Despite an exhaustive search of the tavern yielding no trace of Mary or any conclusive evidence, a significant discovery awaited them. Over $3,000 concealed in various hiding spots within the establishment. The money, a considerable sum for 1954, was stashed away in cigar boxes, plastic bags, purses, and even scattered amongst the stock. As the investigation unfolded, it came to light that Mary had recently deposited over $1,500 into her bank account, adding a layer of mystery to the case. In piecing together the fragments of information, Sheriff Thompson began to construct a grim hypothesis. Mary, seemingly engrossed in her reading, was likely caught off guard by a familiar assailant who entered the tavern and ended her life with a .32 caliber pistol. The presence of a spent cartridge on the floor strengthened the sheriff's conviction that Mary had met a tragic demise at the hands of someone she knew and trusted. The eerie silence surrounding her final moments and the absence of witnesses only deepened the enigma surrounding her disappearance. A few days after Mary vanished, the legal machinery churned into action as a county judge appointed a temporary custodian for her property, emphasizing the urgency of safeguarding Miss Hogan's assets pending further legal proceedings. Public notices were issued to alert potential claimants to her estate, setting the stage for a scheduled hearing in the city of Stevens Point. Sheriff Thompson couldn't shake off the haunting resemblance between Mary Hogan's case and other unsolved disappearances in the area, notably that of 15-year-old Evelyn Hartley and several other individuals who had vanished under mysterious circumstances over the years. The shadow of uncertainty loomed large over the investigation, leaving the law enforcement grappling with perplexing leads and unresolved questions. As the days stretched into weeks and then years, Mary Hogan's disappearance gradually faded into the annals of cold cases. Sheriff Thompson passed the baton to a successor, marking the end of his tenure and the onset of a new chapter in the sheriff's office. Little did they know, another harrowing chapter was about to unfold, this time centered around Bernice Worden, her son Frank, and a man named Ed Gein. In the quiet town of Plainfield, a sinister presence lurked beneath the surface until a fateful evening in 1957, when Frank Worden's worst fears materialized at his mother's abandoned hardware store. The ominous trail of clues pointed towards a familiar face, setting off a chain of events that would unveil the dark secrets harbored by Ed Gein, a name destined to be etched in infamy as the Butcher of Plainfield. The revelations that followed shook the community to its core, laying bare a nightmare that transcended the boundaries of small-town tranquility. On a Friday evening, November 15, 1957, in the quiet town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, Bernice Worden diligently managed her hardware store, the familiar routine of the day slowly winding down. The store, though not bustling, hummed with activity as her adult son Frank Worden, also a deputy sheriff in Plainfield, prepared for a hunting trip. Frank, inherently wary due to his occupation in public safety, closely monitored his surroundings, especially when an unfamiliar customer in the store began questioning him with unnerving specificity about his impending hunting excursion. The man's intrusive behavior raised Frank's suspicions, signaling a threat that couldn't be ignored, especially with his mother's safety at stake. Frank's unease intensified as the customer insinuated an unusual interest in Bernice, who, like the victim of a cold case from 3 years prior, owned a business and often worked alone. The parallels between the disappearances unsettled Frank, leading him to issue a stern warning to the mysterious man, later identified as Ed Gein, to stay away from his mother. However, Frank's dread deepened the following day when he returned from his hunting trip to find his mother's store eerily deserted, signs of a struggle evident with the absence of Bernice, the missing cash register, and a chilling pool of blood staining the floor. A connection emerged as Frank recalled the customer's mention of returning for antifreeze, fueling his suspicions further. The unfolding tragedy led Frank and his fellow officers to confront Ed Gein, who feigned innocence amidst damning evidence. As the investigation unraveled, the gruesome truth emerged. Gein's macabre activities extended beyond imagination, revealing a grim tableau of horror at his farm. Eventually, the decapitated bodies of Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan would be identified among Ed's collection of decaying bodies and body parts. The revelation of decapitated bodies, human remains fashioned into grotesque artifacts, and Gein's unsettling graveyard predations shocked Plainfield's serene facade, thrusting the town into the harsh light of national attention. The despicable acts attributed to Gein, dubbed the Butcher of Plainfield, would forever stain the town's history. Despite Gein's eventual confinement and legal proceedings, his notoriety endured through cinematic adaptations, immortalizing his atrocities in popular culture. His demise in 1984 at the Mendota Mental Health Institute marked the end of a dark chapter, but the legacy of fear and revulsion left by the Butcher of Plainfield lingered on. If you mention Bernice Worden or Mary Hogan, only some people will know who they are or recognize their names. In contrast, if you mention Ed Gein, that name is all too familiar as the Butcher of Plainfield. He is also remembered as the inspiration for popular movies like Psycho, Silence of the Lambs, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I hope you found this story interesting. If you are interested in this subject, please visit tkavanaugh.com and click on the link to American Criminals. Content is added regularly, so subscribe to be notified when new content is added. I do not sell or share any subscriber information. Thank you.